Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hi, everybody. Joe Trippi here, Democratic strategist and host of That Trippi Show and my new show, On the Ground with Joe Trippi. With me is the other Joe, celebrated journalist Joe Klein. Joe's been covering political campaigns for a long, long time, and I've sure been running them just about as long. Sometimes we agree, other times not so much. But today we have a special guest, gubernatorial candidate Jason Esteves, this guy.
Donald Trump is driving up our costs and rigging the system for billionaires while you pay the price. I'm Jason Esteves. As governor, I'll tackle Trump's chaos head on. I'll use every tool that we have, take Trump to court, and I'll pass legislation to protect our families. I'll end the billions in tax giveaways to AI data centers and instead put more money in your pockets. I'll invest in universal child care, and we're going to expand Medicaid. Georgia, it's time to fight back.
Well, let's bring in our special guest, Jason Esteves. And one of the things that is really interesting to me about you, Jason, is your biography, is where you came from and where you started. Two early items, well, one early and one current. You started as a Teach for America volunteer. And the more recent one is that you and your wife have a series of small businesses in Georgia, restaurants, urgent care facilities. And it occurs to me as a longtime Democratic Party skeptic that two groups that Democrats have trouble convincing are education reformers, like the people who run Teach for America, and small business people. My dad was a small business person. And I guess my first question to you is, as one of those guys, why do you think Dems have so much trouble convincing them to vote Democratic?
Look, first of all, Joe, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I have followed your careers as long as I've followed politics, and appreciate all that you've been doing across the country, really. Now, when it comes to Democrats and what I call telling people what we're really about, I think it's incredibly important that we speak more to the issues that people ultimately care about. And as a small business owner, I know many other Democrats that are small business owners too. And guess what? We have opened businesses to try to build wealth. And y'all, there is nothing wrong with building wealth as a Democrat. And not only do I like to build wealth, but I also like to give back to my community and make sure that people have stuff like healthcare and access to a good quality education, and that they can afford housing. So those principles don't conflict with each other, nor does wanting government to operate more efficiently, so that as I open a small business, I don't have to go through a whole bunch of red tape and paperwork that requires you to hire a lawyer to start your own business. So a Democrat can also be for cutting red tape. So Joe, I think that the answer to your question is we can certainly appeal to those folks if we stick to some common sense, pragmatic solutions to address the challenges that we all face, whether we're Democrats or Republicans. The same thing goes for education reform. I think Democrats for too long have been afraid to acknowledge the fact that children who are stuck in schools that are not performing well and not preparing those students like they shouldn't be stuck there. They deserve more options, right? And those options can be other public schools. That's the most important thing. They can be other public schools, but we should talk about the fact that sometimes government is not working like it should, and we should be doing everything that we can to make it more effective, more efficient, and be able to call out the good, just like we should be able to call out the bad.
Could I ask you just one more question about education? Because I can be very boring on this subject. but I do think that education, especially K through 12 education, is the most important unacknowledged issue out there in America, or under acknowledged issue out there in America. And one of the things I like about the military is that whenever they do an operation, they write up a lessons learned report afterwards. And if you were going to give us a lessons learned report about being a teacher, what would you tell folks? Was it fun? Was it frustrating? Was it impossible?
Joe, it's the hardest job I've ever done in my life. But it's also the most rewarding job that I've had, because I taught 150 amazing children middle school social studies, and those kids were no different than any of us, yet they didn't have the same kinds of opportunities simply because of where they lived. And
where was this, Jason?
Say that again?
Where was this?
This was in Houston, Texas.
Uh-huh.
In the north side of Houston, Texas, a low-income community. These kids were living in and many of them were living in poverty. I think the free and reduced lunch rate was in the high 90s. So a pretty low-income community. And those kids deserve every opportunity. And I fought as a middle school social studies teacher to give them those opportunities. And it's what fired me up to go into public service. I would not be here as a candidate for governor had it not been for that classroom experience and me recognizing that the system was failing far too many children and far too many families. So the lessons learned, or one, is that we're relying on our teachers to fix society's issues. When a child comes to school hungry, when they are homeless, when they have mental health issues, when their parents don't have jobs, teachers are expected to fill in all those gaps, whether it's literally opening a health clinic or a mental health office in schools, whether it's having food pantries and clothing closets for students, or it's holding job fairs for their parents. Teachers are expected to fill in the gap, and they really shouldn't be. That should be the responsibility of the state and local government, working with nonprofits, working with the community, to ensure that by the time those children go into classrooms, the teachers have to do the one thing that they're responsible for doing, and that's teaching. But unfortunately, educators now have to do so much more, and it's made the job a lot harder. The other thing that I've learned across the country is that we are a system that's based on remediation, meaning our children start from behind in kindergarten. So the kindergarten teacher is playing catch up. The first grade teacher is playing catch up. And even the 12th grade, the senior year, the senior teachers in 12th grade are still trying to catch students up to where they need to be. If we invested more in early education and early literacy in this country, especially in Georgia, where we can ensure that all children under the age of 5 have the building blocks that they need so that they can learn and write and do math, then our teachers at the elementary school level, middle and high school can actually do more, because they don't have to worry about remediation. It's one of those reasons why I've proposed bringing universal childcare to Georgia, because I understand the importance of investing early, and it also saves taxpayers money, because we would have to invest less on the back end playing catch up. It's very similar, Joe, to what we see in our healthcare system, where it's because we don't do enough preventative care, we spend a lot more on the back end.
I'll leave most of the political questions to Dr. Trippi, who is more than experienced and acute when it comes to asking those sorts of questions. But I guess the basic question is, you come into this as an underdog of sorts. Why did you choose to run for governor? Why not run for Congress? Right? You were a state legislator. Why not take the next rung up the ladder?
Well, look, my thought is that the next rung up the ladder is to be governor of this state. When I think about my career of public service, whether it's been in the classroom, on the school board, or in the state Senate, it's been laser focused on delivering results for people. That's what my career has been, and that's also what what fulfills me. I'm not doing public service for an ego trip. I'm not doing it for the accolades and for the title. I'm literally doing it because I want to change systems that have left far too many people behind. And that requires me to be in positions where I can be an effective leader. I've had opportunities to run for statewide offices in the past. I've had opportunities to run for city council and for other positions. But along the way, I've been very intentional with when I've run for office and what office I've run for, because I want to make sure that I can actually get stuff done. I like to say that I'm part of the GSD caucus, the Gets Shit Done caucus. But ultimately,
that word is now in common usage among Democratic politicians, huh?
It is. But at the end of the day, we got to get stuff done. And there's no better position to do that from the governor's seat, where you can fight back against the chaos, corruption, and destruction that's coming out of the Trump administration. And at the same time, solve the issues that Georgia has been facing for generations, long before Donald Trump became president. And that's what I'll be able to do as governor. My thought when I was thinking about running was that if I went to Congress, I'd be part of a system that is visibly broken and not be able to get anything done. And for me, I'm not going to run for something just for the title.
So can you walk us through, because you've been getting a lot of traction. There's a lot of momentum. You're gaining some traction. What's going on why is that happening? What are the signposts that you're seeing in your campaign that make you that say you're going to succeed at this and it's happening out there?
Yeah, well, look, I came into this race as an underdog. There are folks who are running who have more name ID, have been in politics longer, been in higher profile positions. But folks are tired of the old politics and the politicians that got us in this situation in the first place. And they're looking for a new generation of leadership that is laser focused on getting stuff done. The other thing is that I have a message that resonates with people, that gives people something to vote for. And for too long, we have been telling people what they should be voting against. And as a result, we've been losing elections. I think that Democrats have to focus more on giving people something to vote for. And that's why I crisscross the state talking about health, wealth, and opportunity, and how I can ensure through public policy, through my leadership, that people have access to the healthcare that they need, that they can afford to live in a home in a safe community with good high quality schools, as long as they work hard in a full-time job, right? That's ultimately what people want at a core. So I have a message that is resonating, and I'm working hard to crisscross the state and meet voters where they are. But just as important is what Joe Klein started off with, is the fact that I have a wide range of experience. I'm not your average politician. I am someone who started my time in the classroom, in the front lines. And today I'm a small business owner. My wife and I own an urgent care. She's a nurse practitioner, and we own 2 breakfast restaurants, and we own them across the state in 3 different cities in Georgia. So I literally work on the cook line every couple of weeks when I need to, and no other politician in this race can talk about that. And I think that's important when it comes to connecting and talking to voters about the issues they care about. They want someone who is actually experiencing their challenges to lead them out of those challenges.
As a Yankee Northerner, I can attest to the fact that running a breakfast restaurant in Georgia is the most serious of businesses. It's absolutely an art form. The striking thing to me about the early stuff, and for those who aren't familiar with Georgia politics, we should say that you're running against the former mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. And she has, much higher name recognition. She's ahead of you in the polls, but you've been out fundraising her. What's that about?
It's highly unusual, and I'm sure Joe Trippi would agree. Yeah. In many of these campaigns, you usually don't have the underdog outraising the front runner, especially when the front runner has ridiculous name ID, not only in Georgia but across the country. And I have worked really hard to build relationships in the state. I've done the work of doing the basics of call time and meetings, and I think that given my profile, given the scrappiness of our campaign, given the fact that the former one-term mayor doesn't necessarily have a good reputation here in Georgia as far as the baggage and the leadership that she had as mayor, has helped my campaign. So there's a mix, Joe, of the fact that she has some baggage and that we have a scrappy campaign that is not taking anything for granted, and we're doing a lot of hard work. The fact that we've been able to outraise a former one-term mayor, a former Republican lieutenant governor, and a former county executive says a lot about the momentum that we have been able to build with the donors here in Georgia. 90% of our money has come from inside the state of Georgia. So while my opponents are trying to raise nationally, they haven't been able to do it, and we've been able to fundraise from the people right here in the state.
Yeah, there's something. The one thing that I think is clear, and I just want to get your take on it. There's something going on. I mean, like, OSA, for example, was supposed to be this big knockdown, drag out, and like no one's even talking about the race anymore. The energy on the ground. I don't know what you're feeling from independents and others. I mean, it seems to me it's more than competitive. I mean, I think that the Democratic nomination for governor of Georgia is going to be worth something this time. Or give us your take of what, as you travel around the state, what you're running into. Is it the economy? I mean, is it the gas prices? I mean, what's sort, or is it just the chaos of Trump? I mean, or all of it?
Well, look,
what's happening?
It's a couple of different things, and let me start off with the facts. Right, the fact is that over the last 8 cycles in Georgia, Democrats have made significant gains in each one of those cycles. That is a fact. The other fact is that in 2024, when Democrats lost all over the state, all over the country, in Georgia, Kamala Harris lost by 115,000 votes. That is closer than Pennsylvania, Arizona, and North Carolina. All 3 of those states already have Democratic governors, right? So we are squarely in the battleground arena. Here's the other thing, is that Kamala Harris lost by 115,000 votes. In Metro Atlanta alone, a Democratic stronghold, we had 200,000 voters, Joe Trippi, that stayed home in 2024 that voted in 2020, right? Had those voters come out, we probably would have won. Why did they stay home? Because of the message and the fact that they felt like Democrats were not speaking to the issues that they cared about, and the number one issue on their mind was affordability. Why does that matter today? Because the issue that Donald Trump ran on is the issue where he has completely failed to fulfill a promise, and that's cutting the cost of living and bringing down inflation. His reckless policies, whether it's tariffs, whether it's the war in Iran and Venezuela and every other excursion that he goes on, is raising prices and causing a lot of issues for our economy here in Georgia. People are tired of it. And in addition to that, they're tired of the fact that they feel like the Republicans at the state capitol in Atlanta are focused more on special interests and billionaires and corporations instead of the hardworking people of the state. And as a result, as I crisscross Georgia, I am meeting Republican farmers, people who are in rural Georgia, who want to see change. They want to see a change in leadership. They want to see a new direction for the state, and they are open to listening. So what's going to ensure that we win in November is having a candidate like me that can meet voters where they are, regardless of whether they're rural voters or live in cities, regardless of the Republican, Democrat, or independent, and speak to issues that unite us all. And that's why I focus so much on health, wealth, and opportunity, because I feel like no matter who you are in this state, those are the issues you care about.
How big an issue is Donald Trump in all this? Our quote of the week this week comes from you, and in it you say that you want to take Donald Trump to court. Well, that hasn't worked out so well for Democrats in the past. What would you take him to court on? And is he a decisive factor in this race?
Yeah, look, I'd argue that taking Trump to court has been a good tool that Democratic governors have used across the country, whether it's getting the National Guard out of California or Illinois, whether it's ensuring that frozen grants for cities were released, whether it's making sure that those the firings that have happened at the federal level, the Doge, a lot of those firings and layoffs were reversed. Democrats have had significant wins that have actually put money into people's pockets, right? And in Georgia, we have not necessarily benefited from that. We have a governor in Brian Kemp who stood up against Donald Trump in 2020 and then completely fell flat and is now on bended knee. He's been silent or has cheerled Donald Trump's actions. And as a result, what have we seen in this state? We have seen the CDC and our public health system get dismantled, the CDC being one of the big employers in Georgia. We've seen multiple grants and federal projects get paused or be pulled around the state in critical cities and counties. We've seen our farmers in rural Georgia not get the Hurricane Helene relief that they were promised under the Biden administration. So his silence and his cheerleading has not helped the hardworking people of the state. So when I talk about taking Trump to court, we should be suing the administration to get as many resources and to stop as many of the bad things that they're doing from getting into effect. And I think that if more governors stood their ground, we would be more effective at holding at bay a lot of what Trump is trying to do. So Trump is going to be a big issue in Georgia. But I will tell you that in addition to Donald Trump, the other big opponent in this race is going to be the couch. And it goes back to what I told you earlier. We have to get voters out to vote, and they have to feel confident that we can actually make changes and implement the agenda that we've been talking about, which is why it's incredibly important that we give voters something to vote for. Because if we just run against Donald Trump, we won't get the voters that stayed home in 2024.
And when is the election? I mean, I know it's coming up, right, in May. So tell us, how that's going to. And are you going to be on TV? More TV ads or grassroots? I mean, what plan on carrying these last weeks of the campaign? Yeah,
so there are about a little under 6 weeks left prior to the primary on May 19th. So we're gonna be on TV, we're gonna be on digital, and we're the only campaign doing canvassing and postcards and phone banking all at the same time. So we're running a pretty good grassroots operation as well. But here's the thing, Joe, is that in Georgia we have the runoff system. So the top two go for a second round, and this race is highly likely, almost guaranteed, to go into a runoff. So we are very likely going to have another 4 weeks of campaigning, and that's where the rubber meets the road. A lot of folks who aren't from Georgia don't know this, but the last 4 governors were underdogs in their race. They ran against well-financed, more well-known opponents. And those well-known opponents lost each and every time because of our runoff system. And I anticipate that that's going to happen again this time around because we are building a true grassroots organization that is coalition building across this state with a message that gets people excited.
Georgia is a weird and dynamic place and a wonderful place. And I noticed
weird, dynamic, and wonderful. I like that.
in the weirdness category, Marjorie Taylor Greene says she is no longer a Republican. She doesn't say what she is. She might be a Democrat. She might be an independent, more likely. But could you ever see yourself in the same party as Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Look, I'll work with anyone who wants to deliver for hardworking people. I'll work for anyone who wants to level the playing field and ensure that there's fairness and opportunity across this state and across the country. So to me, the party label doesn't matter as much. What matters is the work. What are you doing to actually walk your talk? And for too long, we've had a lot of folks saying things, but they don't follow through when it comes to public policy. They don't follow through when it comes to the work in the community. So I'll work with her or anybody else when it comes to expanding access to Medicaid and improving our public education system and ensuring that we're bringing down or increasing wages so that people can actually afford to buy a home. It doesn't matter who you are. I'll work with Donald Trump. It doesn't matter as long as we're actually benefiting those who are working hard across the state.
I think we're about out of time, Jason. I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find you online, or or any of the handles or your website, to let them know how they can find out more about you or connect with your campaign and help.
Yeah, look, I invite folks to look at the race here in Georgia. Where Georgia goes, the rest of the South goes. So we have a great opportunity to really make transformational change this year by finishing the job and flipping this state. So I invite folks to follow me on social media at Jason Esteves, or visit my website, jasonesteves.com, and join our movement, whether it's through donating, volunteering, or just spreading the word. We're building a grassroots organization that is not only going to win in November of this year, but it's going to change the face of leadership in Georgia for generations to come. So I want people to pay attention and join the team.
Well, I'm looking forward to visiting one of your restaurants and trying out the fatback bacon and cheesy grits.
There we go. We have creamy, dreamy grits, Joe.
Really?
We do it. I'm doing a show called On the Ground. When we get on the ground, and Joe and I may have to get on the ground and visit that restaurant and see how it's going as this gets, particularly maybe in the runoff.
Here's the thing. My restaurants, one's in Columbus, which is middle Georgia, and one's in Macon in middle Georgia. The other one's in Columbus in West Georgia. So you'll have a good mix away from the big city of Atlanta. So it'll give you exposure to how people really feel outside of Metro Atlanta.
Cool. Well, best to you, Jason. Thanks for being with us. And everybody, please check him out and check out his website and on social media, and do what you can to get involved in Georgia. I think it's going to be a big year for us down there. And thanks for giving it a shot, Jason, and giving it your all.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me.
You could be a little bit more enthusiastic, though, I think.
Look, I am excited. And look, we have a president that is literally feeding on our despair. We need to restore that hope. And that's the message I've been hearing all across the state, which is why I'm bringing the energy everywhere I go.
Cool.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks again, y'all. Have a great weekend.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.